Thanks, Rob. So today I'm going to be talking to you about our Visual Studio plugin. As you know, one of the biggest new features in RhoElements 4.0 is support for Windows Phone 8. And so for those developers and for other Microsoft-oriented developers in general, Visual Studio is a very popular tool. So we're adding a Visual Studio plugin, and this is actually usable now. It's up on GitHub. So with that, let's talk about a reminder of what our features are for 4.0. You may not have attended the 4.0 webinar. What we're trying to do is extend our lead in our clean sheet of paper for enterprise mobility, taking the best of modern development practices, model view controller, ORM, scaffolding in the cloud applied to mobile apps. And that's not something that we're seeing from other enterprise platforms. We want to take our unique approach to other languages. In the past, we did everything in Ruby and most things in JavaScript. We will do everything in 4.0. We do everything in JavaScript. There's JavaScript for everything, both on the RhoElements side and the RhoConnect side. We're also coalescing our APIs, so we have one set of common APIs for all operating systems. Today, if you look at the API matrix, you'll see some that are maybe more enterprise and MS Motorola device centric, and some that are some other APIs that are for all other consumer operating systems. So we're merging those. And we want to continue to lead in device and operating system diversity, and one area of that is Windows Phone 8. So why care about Windows Phone 8? Who really cares? Isn't it just all about Android and iPhone? Well, the fact is, in some markets, Windows Phone 8 is, in terms of run rate, is even leading iOS. Of course, Android remains a huge force, but it varies from market to market, and the year-over-year growth rate is strong. From a low base, the ship rate increased 50% over last year. But most importantly, especially for Motorola, is that Windows Phone 8 will be the basis of future Microsoft-based enterprise devices, like Windows Mobile was in the past. So there will be additional calls, and Microsoft will be sharing more information as time goes on. But we do want to support those enterprise devices. Those of you that want to get a jump on that, you should really start investigating developing for Windows Phone 8. So why support Visual Studio? We have Rho Studio, runs everywhere. We could just run it there. Well, Visual Studio is more familiar to Microsoft developers. It's also faster to start up and execute than Eclipse. And we want to support developers in whatever environment they prefer. In fact, we'll be doing more features as time goes on. Rob has given a great webinar on developing with Sublime Text 2, which is a great editor. We want to make sure that you can write RhoMobile apps with whatever your editor and IDE tool of choice is. And to that end, we'll be talking later about some of the decomposition of some of the features that we have inside Rho Studio today. Note that we are not abandoning Rho Studio. It's still an important tool for us. We just want to make sure that if you're using Visual Studio, that you can continue to use that and still use RhoMobile Suite. So with that, to that end, we have the following roadmap for Visual Studio support. In this first release, we have an installer, app generation, code editing, building just for Windows Phone 8, and launch and run on both Rho Simulator, the Windows Phone 8 simulator, and the device itself. I actually have a beautiful HTC Windows Phone 8X in front of me now. I can't really demo that to you live, but that's a great device to test it on. I will be showing you running it from the Rho simulator. All of the things that you're seeing listed for July, you can actually test today. It is very much a beta product, very early beta, but it is up there today on github.com. I'll be showing you the URL for you to run today. And this is all to coincide with the RhoElements 4.0 release in July. We will be doing a subsequent release 4.1 where we add JavaScript debugging, build for Windows Mobile and Windows CE. You will need to have Visual Studio 2008 installed for that. We will support IntelliSense for all of the Rho APIs. And then in the future, we're going to add a lot of new exciting features like Rho Connect projects, Ruby debugging, building for Android, and remote build. But part of the purpose here today is to get you start getting feedback from those of you that are interested and would use this. And so if there's other things that you want to see, you definitely want to get your feedback, and there's even the opportunity to potentially bring it into the 4.1 release, maybe if it's small, even into the 4.0 release. So here's what you need to do to get it going. You will install Visual Studio 2012. You do need Visual Studio 2012 Professional, not Visual Studio 2012 Express. We are a full Visual Studio extension. We call it a plugin because that's the common parlance, but it is an extension where we actually extend the menus and the environment, and that you do need the at least Professional Edition for. You'll install the Windows Phone 8 SDK. Then you'll install RhoMobile Suite Beta 11. You can see the link to download that on Launchpad. If this is later in time, you'll be installing the latest RMS. You can optionally install the latest roads. You do not have to. You can optionally install it, and then you'll point in your project's build YML, you'll point it to the gem location of the latest roads. You should not have to do that. Note that just something to note is that you do have the ability to do builds for Windows Phone 8 with Rake Run WP8, Rake Run WP8 Rho Simulator, Rake Run WP8 Device. So you can do that. That's a nice way to sort of validate your environment for Windows Phone 8. And then, but again, this piece is not required. Now, to test and install on a Windows Phone 8 device, you want to follow these instructions on how to set up your device. Normally, your device can only get things from the Windows Store, so the Windows Marketplace. So you will want to, I do recommend testing on a device just as we say for Android. Both the Android emulator and the Windows Phone emulator are a bit slow. More than a bit slow, and so I definitely recommend using both Rho Simulator and an actual device. And so this is something I highly recommend that you do. So to get the plugin, you will go to github.com/RhoMobile/VS plugin, and you'll see there's a V6 package. Normally we don't like to check in binaries on GitHub. It's generally not a best practice, but we've tried to make it really easy for you. So if you go there and you're running a Windows machine and you click on the V6 package, it will all just install for you. You do want to make sure that you've installed those other components first, both RhoMobile Suite and Visual Studio. Okay, with that, I'm going to jump to a demo. So please also start thinking of questions, because as you can guess, this is probably going to be a pretty short webinar, so we definitely want to get feedback from you. So now I'm going to go to my VMware environment. And here I have Visual Studio running. And the way I'm going to generate a project is I'm going to say File, New, Project. And so you'll see that there's RhoMobile, and you'll see we have a RhoMobile Windows Phone 8 project. And we'll call this VS Plugin Webinar. Now you can generate it for roads and row elements, just like you could in RhoStudio. I'm just going to write a roads app. Now for this release, you'll see that we're really emphasizing Windows Phone 8 as a consumer operating system. So most times the way you're really targeting Windows Phone 8 roads is probably going to be enough for you for this release. So now we get this familiar project hierarchy that if you've used RhoStudio, you're probably quite used to. You have the app directory, and What we're going to do is we're going to add a new item, and we're going to add a RhoMobile model. And let's go ahead and write an inventory app. I'm going to add a product model, and I'm going to say it has a brand, a name, a price, and a quantity. And you can see that now we have the product model. Now what you'll see is here you have the product RB controller. We may add Ruby syntax highlighting in this release. That may or may not get into this release. It does not have the Ruby syntax highlighting. The views, however, we get the nice HTML highlighting in our ERB files. And let's go back to our top level ERB, and let's go ahead and add a link to the product model. Call this inventory manager. And let's go ahead and save that. Now, notice here we have this run capability. You can click on Start. We have a configuration manager, and you'll see that we have configurations for Row Simulator, the actual device, and a Windows Phone 8 emulator. I actually do have a device hooked up. I'm not going to run the emulator. That takes a long time to run. And in fact, just as on Android, it's not something I particularly recommend. I definitely recommend a device for debugging. So let's go ahead and run it on the Row Simulator, since you're not going to be able to see my device. So let's go ahead and start it up. And it will go ahead and do the build. Now you're going to see an error where it says that it doesn't have Java on my path. In fact, Java is on my path. I don't have the JDK installed on my VMware Fusion image, but it turns out that's just fine. You don't really actually need it for doing a Windows Phone 8 build.
Hey Adam, while it's building, let me ask you a couple of questions that came in. So, in regards to
Yes,
this beta
sure.
version, oh, that was pretty quick. I thought it was going to take a little longer. Can this beta version coexist with current production versions? I mean, maybe this gets into a bigger conversation, but
No,
um,
okay, this is not really this. Oh, yes, if you mean like, can you have row elements and RhoMobile Suite 4.0 installed? Yes. Yeah, I mean, you're going to need to make sure, play around with your build YAML if you start doing that. But I mean, that's not so much germane to VS Plugin as it is to, using the beta version of RhoMobile Suite and the 2.2 version.
yeah,
So the reason that you need the beta version of RhoMobile Suite is so you can do the Windows Phone 8 build. VS Plugin um, is, if you're referring to the plugin itself, of course, there is no production version of the VS plugin. It's a very new thing.
yeah, I think the
So I
question
think you
was,
were
yeah.
referring to RhoMobile Suite, and yes, you can have the beta installed and the Row Elements 2.2 installed, but then you just need to make sure as you build your projects that you're pointing to the version of Row Elements and roads that you want to use. So then just to show that, you would be in your build YAML, just make sure that you're pointing to the version of the SDK that you want to use. Does that answer the question you were
Yeah, I
looking
think so.
for?
I think generally there's this question seems to come up quite a bit, so there's probably some confusion around Row Studio, right? The version of Row
Mhm.
Studio, and maybe this question is more related to currently just in general the beta, maybe not so much the Visual Studio plugin, but you can install the Row Mobile Suite or Row Studio beta version and still be able to build what you're calling production, which is 2.2 applications versus
Yes.
beta applications, and this is what Adam was talking about. Is you need to make it's different. So there's Row Studio, and then there's the gems. The gems are required for actually building the applications, and that's where you actually get
Correct.
into different versions of applications. So it
Correct.
looks
And
like
you can always point your build YAML at different gems as you choose.
yeah. I think where people got confused was when you actually install the beta, it tells you to uninstall the previous version. So, but anyway, I think that we addressed the question.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
You know what? That's pretty much the extent of it. I just wanted to show you running inside Visual Studio. We've shown the key features, right? Generate the project, generate the models, edit, um, build, and run. I wish I could show you my beautiful new HTC Windows Phone 8X device, but we're not set up to do that right now. But those are the key core features, and I think the right thing at this point probably just open it up to the floor for questions about Windows Phone 8 support and the Visual Studio plugin.
Okay. Yeah. So, are you running on a Windows 8 operating system right now, or are
Yeah,
you?
this is Windows 8. This is Windows 8 on a VMware Fusion image. As you know, Rob, it's on my Mac. So yeah, this is
Yep.
all running under VMware Fusion. One of the things I will point out for those of you running Macs that want to do this is you do need to set up your uh, Hyper-V uh, with some settings to allow the Windows Phone 8 emulator to work underneath it. So if you look up VMware Fusion and Windows Phone 8 emulator, there is a setting that you need to set in your Hyper-V um, virtual machine manager to enable the Hyper-V virtual machine to coexist with the VMware virtual machine.
Okay, but Windows 8 desktop is required in order to build for Windows Phone 8,
For Windows
right?
Phone 8, that is correct. In
Okay.
fact, yes,
And
that
is
is
are there
required.
so if I now need to
And
go to
and
the
the other thing is to mention is that you do also need to run Visual Studio 2012, and as we mentioned, professional versus Express.
okay, so removing the studio Visual Studio plugin from the picture. Now that I'm on a new operating system and a new Visual Studio version, are there any issues or things that we should know about when building for Windows Mobile and Windows CE current current platforms or
We
products?
cannot. No, you will still need to use Visual Studio 2008 for that.
Okay,
You can't do it with Visual Studio 2012. You can do newer versions of CE. You can build for CE 7 on Visual Studio 2012, but that is not something that we are doing inside the plugin today. In Row Elements 4.1, we are going to target CE7 inside Visual Studio 2012, and we will. This is my Windows Phone 8 device waking up. Um, and we will support the plugin inside Visual Studio 2008 for older Windows Mobile as well.
okay, that's what your slide before mentioned
The,
that later on. Okay,
right.
okay. Um, all right, that answered the question, I believe. Somebody else asked a question, but I'm not quite clear on what this question means, Val. Can we use this plugin to develop for ET1 as long as you don't use device-specific APIs? So the ET1 is
No, no, but
yeah.
we're not supporting Android build today.
Okay.
There's no intrinsic reason, to be honest. If this is something that we really see people that are targeting Android want, we could potentially push it up to 4.1. So this is definitely an area where we want to listen to what you guys want to use. And if you wanted Android build sooner, we could potentially push that up. Probably not by the 4.0 release, but possibly early in the 4.1 development.
Okay. Just some other general beta questions.
We're
Sorry, Adam, go
yeah.
ahead. I was talking over you.
Go ahead. No, what other general questions?
Yeah,
Yes.
just other beta news. Any new beta releases that will be coming out, or anything else that as far as updates to the beta.
We will have another beta later this month. Towards the end of the month, it'll probably be in a week or so. So keep an eye on Launchpad. Um, and we will have another beta there. We will have another beta in June that will be a feature complete beta, and then the final release will be in at the end of July. So we will have the feature complete beta in June. Um, we've had to pull in some significant features. We've added support for multi-tab WebKit, so that has pushed out the schedule slightly, but we will still have that feature complete beta in June. That's probably the most significant beta news.
Okay. Let's see. Here's a question from Kevin. How does the application appear on the Windows Phone 8 device? Is it an icon? Is it a tile? Does it look any different? Can we control? Is it still uh, leveraging the way we can customize the icon and the loading screens and any detail?
Um, it, uh, it 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 is an app like any other app. As far as the appearance, it is fairly plain, almost by design. This is something that we are researching: is what can we do as far as JavaScript styling libraries. In fact, I'm sure Rob, you'll be playing a key role in that. Um, if you did want to have a more Metro style UI, there are JavaScript styling libraries that accomplish that. But you will see that in what we run um, on Windows Phone, it is very plain, and there is a work item to try to get that um, more Windows Phone 8 like, and more, I guess they're calling that modern UI like now. Um, but that is, you're not going to see that in the beta. The screens are actually very uh, quite stripped down, and we definitely need to do some work on the optimization there.
Yeah, as we get
Optimization for
further,
appearance, that
yeah,
is.
as we get further along, we'll highlight some of the ways you can make your application look phone 8 like. There are definitely styling libraries that are available. So, getting back to the build environment, so we talked about using Visual Studio 2012 for this operating Windows Phone 8, and then using Visual Studio. RhoStudio or Visual Studio 2008 for the older operating systems. If we have one
Right,
project,
but you
yeah,
you do, just to emphasize, you can of course still build for Windows Phone 8 from either RhoStudio or the command line.
right. And so if we had the same project, we can work on that project in both studios, I
Yes,
guess, simultaneously. Not simultaneously, but
it
you
it
won't have
is the
any.
same. It's exactly the same file structure in
Yeah,
both, as you can probably guess from looking at this hierarchy here.
yeah. So there won't be any compatibility issues, or if you're in one Visual Studio 2012 and then you jump into the other Visual Studio, you won't have any problems kind of jumping between versions, right?
Correct. I think that's a little strange to do. I'm not sure if it's something that I would recommend if you really are writing for the multiple operating systems. Um, yeah, I would probably stay of inside RhoStudio. But you could switch if you really wanted to. As a developer, I would find that a little jarring to keep looking at different views of the same app. But if you wanted to do that, you could.
Yeah, and we always have the command line for pretty much every option to build and run. So I agree with Adam. You should really just kind of live in one environment, and if you need to build for the different platforms, you kick it off with the command line. So
Right, right.
yeah, so
And this
somebody
is
else.
another thing. Like if we see that people say, geez, I really like Visual Studio and I'm using it for my Windows Phone 8 build, and you know what, I really want to build for Android as well. I mean, we'll pull in that feature. This is something we really just want to get a sense of. Is Visual Studio support something just that's most relevant just for people writing for Windows Phone 8 and then for Windows Mobile, or is it something um, where even people writing for Android devices would want to use it? So definitely give us your feedback and tell us if that's a feature you want, or if there's any other things that you'd like to see inside the plugin.
Okay, and I know you mentioned this in the beginning of the call, but this person may have came in after. This is so he's basically saying this is not a replacement for RhoStudio. No, it's not. This is an addition to something.
Correct. We're not getting rid of RhoStudio. Don't worry.
It's not
I
going
mean,
away.
it may be a replacement in how you use it, right? You might say, like for the OSs I'm targeting, I'm just going to use Visual Studio, but we have no plans to get rid of RhoStudio. But we definitely have run into customers that say, you know what, I like the Visual Studio environment better than Eclipse, and we are we are neutral on the topic of what's the best environment. So whether it's Visual Studio or RhoStudio or Sublime Text or whatever, we want to make sure that we're giving you the right tools for whatever IDE you want to use.
Okay. Let's see. All right, so this is when you're, I guess, building a Windows Phone 8 app. Can you run it directly to the device, or do you have to go through some sort of
Oh
window?
yeah, you can run it directly to the device.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That when if I pick device here, it will run it on my device. It will fire it up on my Windows Phone. All I have to do is click on that and then click start, and it will fire it up on my Windows Phone. You do need to make sure you do that step where you enable your phone you actually do need to join the Windows Phone 8 developer program. It's $99. And then you need to go through the steps that are on that slide. Um, you need to go through these steps um, right here to enable your device to accept apps. It's not like Android where you can just install, whatever you want. The way I would put it is Windows Phone 8 is this interesting sort of middle ground between um, iOS and Android in terms of openness in a number of interesting ways. It's probably a topic for another call, but like iOS locks a lot of stuff down. It also says, hey, you can't really run anything in background. Android sort of lets you do what you want. Anything can run in background. For example, when you're writing a Windows Phone 8 app, you have to make things run in background, you have to implement a certain API, and it can only run in background in certain ways. So it's interesting across the board. Windows Phone 8, I think, has struck a really nice balance between the sort of complete openness of Android and the more closed nature of iOS.
Yeah, somebody had actually commented. Speaking of iOS, had asked, and I don't see this happening, but maybe you have a different perspective, Adam. But actually building for iOS under Windows, I don't think we'll ever see that happen. We do have RhoHub.
Well, no, in a way you do have it, right? Because we actually have remote build today inside RhoStudio, and we're going to add that to the Visual Studio plugin as well. So you would be able to remote build for iOS. You can remote build for iOS today from RhoStudio using the RhoHub-based remote build. There's an option for remote build. Um, this is yet another example that if you say, hey, I really like the Visual Studio environment, I'd like to do remote builds, we would consider pulling this feature in and doing it sooner.
Yeah, I think he was talking just locally, but yeah, we definitely
No,
have.
I don't. Yeah, we're not going to be doing. I'm not sure if it's possible at all, but it's not something uh, that we have any plans to do. Is local build for iOS
Right. So the
from
remote build
Windows 8.
option that you talk about is an integration with RhoHub to make it kind of seamless to do that. But can you take a Visual Studio, I mean a Windows Phone 8 project today, upload it to RhoHub, and build, without this integration, can you do any building for Windows Phone 8 on RhoHub today or no?
Uh, but I don't think we have the beta hosted. We tend to wait on RhoHub till stuff's released. This is another area where we could potentially put the beta up there if we get demand for it. By the time we release, we certainly will have Windows Phone 8. We'll have support for RMS 4.0 builds on RhoHub, and that will include Windows Phone 8 builds, of course.
Okay. And just I know that this plugin is on GitHub now, but when we release it, will it be part of RhoMobile Suite or always as a separate
It
download?
it will be a separate install now. We will be doing a integrated install of everything, including Visual Studio, later. But it will be a separately downloadable install. So it will be available on Launchpad. We're not planning on removing it from GitHub though. It will be up there as well. And by the way, the full source is up there. You can actually track the development if you want. Um, if you want to fork it and send us pull requests, we'd consider those as well. So we are planning on keeping the source for this open source.
Right. Okay. And Val was asking about debugging, and I'm glad you have the slide up because it looks like it's coming in terms of JavaScript debugging and Ruby debugging. Um, but you can, so that doesn't mean you can't do any debugging now, right? I mean, you still have the row simulator, which allows you to do some type of
Hmm.
debugging, right?
Hmm.
I think what
Right.
you're talking about setting like breakpoints and things like that inside Visual Studio. That's what's
Yeah. There's a significant effort. What we need to do is we need to separate out um, the debugger that we have today from the rest of RhoStudio, and then we need a way to integrate that inside Visual Studio. That is going to be a significant project. So that's something that may take some. I'm not sure I see that coming in before January. So this would be the Ruby debugging inside the Visual Studio environment. We are planning on taking the existing debugger inside RhoStudio and sort of making that a standalone debugger that you could use from whatever, Sublime Text or whatever environment you wanted.
great. All right, good stuff. Good stuff. Any other questions from the audience? I don't see any other questions that we haven't answered. I believe in the queue. So we'll give it a minute while you're thinking your last minute questions. We do have some other webinars coming up uh, regarding 4.0, and as we release new betas, we'll have some new APIs that we'll be demonstrating. So definitely stay tuned to Launchpad for announcements for upcoming sessions and previews and demonstrations of all the great new 4.0 features. So let's see. Will this eventually, Kevin, with the last minute question, will this eventually include build for Windows 8 desktop? Oh, yeah. So Windows 8 desktop.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I didn't list that here, but yes, we would want you to be able to build for any environment that it was practical to build for. So the answer is yes.
Okay. He likes that answer. So, okay. Let's see. How do we manage the Windows Phone 8 tiles in this environment? I think, I don't know if you meant to say files or tiles, but
I think this is the JavaScript styling thing.
yeah.
So we're going to have to, in fact, and Rob Galvin, your friendly host here, will probably be leading the charge on helping with the selection, but we'll be picking some kind of recommended JavaScript styling library to approximate the Windows Phone 8, what used to be called Metro, now is called Modern UI, um, and um, and I see that as a great topic for a future webinar, Rob.
Yeah, we'll do a dive on that one, Hayden. I'll provide a link when I post a recording so you can take a look at it. I think it's called Metro UI CSS. I don't remember off the top of my head right now, but there's definitely a library which actually looks quite nice. I haven't gotten a chance to really play around with it, but it looks quite nice. And I think maybe his question was more like today we have this, some native controls like native tab bar, native menu. Are we going to see any type of API like that would give us some native UI elements. I don't think we have anything on the plate right now to do that, but I think the styling libraries might get you what you're looking for.
Right.
All right. Let's see. Anything else here? Yeah. Okay. Just some more feedback. Definitely looks like Adam. Looks like they're definitely everybody's looking forward to this plugin and further integration, including remote debugging. So I got some good feedback here. All right. Any last minute
Great.
questions? All right. Great. All right. Thanks everybody. So that ends today's session. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Adam.
Okay, thanks, Rob.